It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
My personality is I want to win badly. I want to win more Lombardis for Philadelphia and our fans. We got the greatest fans around, and I will do everything possible.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And it is brought to you by PropSwap, where America buys and sells sports bets. Geoff Mosher is here. The Eagles make another, I would say, minor signing today, but a little interesting to dive into. They made a trade yesterday. They made a signing on Monday, so they kept all the beat guys busy, and they keep us busy as well. Jalen Hurts spoke today. I like what I've heard from him as well. And Geoff Mosher joins us now here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline for another edition of Football at 4. What's going on, Moshe?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, you're right. The Eagles are keeping us busy, even in the, some teams, Mike, and the Eagles in the past, they kept you busy in March, the first 2 weeks of free agency. Now we're busier in May.
Boy, they are really
kind of like it that way.
They are really following the blueprint from 17, aren't they? Like, hey, let's wait as long as we can, find some guys under the radar that people aren't really thinking are going to help us all that much. So let's start with LaRaven Clark. For those of you who don't know who that is, he played with the Colts. He was a third-round pick. Now, he has a torn Achilles, so I don't even know if he's going to be healthy enough to play. But I find this signing, sneakingly interesting, Geoff, because he's a swing tackle. He's played guard. He knows Sirianni's offense, obviously. And I guess it makes a guy like Dillard more expendable.
It could possibly make a guy like Dillard more expendable, certainly because LaRaven Clark plays tackle. He can play tackle. He's built like a tackle, has both tackle and guard experience, but I think his natural position is tackle. And you're right. You look at the situation now and you see, wow, you've got Jordan Mailata can play tackle. You've got Andre Dillard, of course, who's a tackle. LaRaven Clark is a tackle. Jack Driscoll is someone who had played tackle for them last year, right tackle. Lane Johnson plays tackle. And then Brett Toth and Casey Tucker, some of these guys who are fringe roster and probably won't make it, but can still play tackle. And whenever you have that kind of surplus and you have an aggressive GM like Howie Roseman, I do think signs indicate that it could lead for Howie to want to trade Andre Dillard if a good deal came around and if they were convinced Jordan Mailata was going to win left tackle moving forward. But it is also hard to read too much into LaRaven Clark because, as you just mentioned, coming off the Achilles, I can't imagine he'll even be able to start practicing until August, right? Because it's usually 9 months from the injury. The injury happened in December, but they must feel fairly confident that he'll come back in pretty good form. Now, he wasn't exactly Jason Peters.
No.
But he doesn't necessarily have to be the top backup either at offensive tackle, even if they did trade Andre Dillard because of the what they've stockpiled there throughout the off seasons.
Geoff, they played 6 different guys at tackle last year, right? I mean, 6 different players got to start at one of the tackle positions last year. So this obviously just adds to that. And as you mentioned, the Dillard thing I find fascinating mainly because, one, he did not play last year, so it's really hard to quantify who he even is as a player. He has very little experience. But here's what I want to pick your brain on and what you know from talking to personnel people. Mm-hmm. You have a GM who drafted him in the first round, traded up to get him. You have a coaching staff who has no ties to this guy. Who wins that battle?
Well, it depends. It may not have to be a battle if the GM himself even recognizes that maybe the pick wasn't the best pick, or that if the GM himself can say, hey, the guy I picked 2 years prior in the 7th round is now going to be our starting left tackle. So that's a feather in my cap as well. And I'm talking about Jordan Mailata there. So I don't know that ego is really going to get in the way here. I think value is the question. I just don't know if Howie Roseman's going to flip him for a 6th rounder just to get him off the roster. You know, I think
right.
that there's enough question marks so that it's hard to get a first or I would think a first or a second back in return or the same kind of currency you put in, but there's still a limited enough sample size. It's not like they reached. I mean, he was a 1st round tackle.
Right, but so talking to personnel people, he hasn't played, but there's got to be people who said, hey, look, I scouted this guy in 2019, and we had him as the 20th pick in the draft or the 30th pick in the draft. There's got to be some front office who says, look, I don't have a lot of tape on him in the NFL either, but when we were scouting him in college, we really liked him a lot.
Yeah, I asked around about that pick back when it happened, even a year after. And the one thing that people would say is that while he was kind of anywhere in the mid-late first round. Some people had early second. And they did note that was not the best offensive line draft as far as tackles. He went 22nd. I'm trying to think I think he was the first offensive tackle taken in that draft at 22nd. So that just tells you right there. Usually you see tackles going 5, 10, 15, the elite ones. And then right after him, the Texans took Titus Howard, who was a small school Alabama State project tackle. So, and those were the only two tackles drafted that year in the first round. And I remember the following year, kind of, 'cause it's a year later, he didn't have the greatest rookie year, asking about guys who were going to go in the first round, like Jedrick Willis or Mekhi Becton, Andrew Howard, those names. And those guys had a more favorable rating. That scouts felt that those guys were more projected to be elite than, say, Andre Dillard. So again, the Eagles took him 22nd. It's not like they traded up top 10,
right? But
it was a weak class. So you can see the luster kind of coming off a little bit. And certainly there were questions from pro scouts about his toughness. The footwork was not an issue. The dancing bear type quality of being able to move and pivot, not an issue at all. The athleticism is absolutely there. The toughness and the physical grind, the ability to withstand a really good bull rusher was definitely questioned about him.
Well, and keep in mind, he was drafted for a different coach, different system. He was not known as a run blocker. I can tell you that coming out of Washington State. Now you have a coach who, hey, he might rely on the run a little bit more. So the front office might say, hey, we drafted him for an offense that's no longer here, and be more apt to say we're willing to part ways with him. Which brings me to another guy who's similar. I posted a story with my 53-man roster projection, which is very early, and I have J.J. Ortega Whiteside making it, to which I'm getting flamed by people. How can you keep this guy as 148 yards in 2 seasons? And I said, he was a second-round pick, and another coaching staff is going to say, what did the other regime not get out of him? What can we do to get more? And that's another guy that you wonder, is Roseman going to be ready to give up on this guy, or is the new coaching staff going to say, look, we can get something out of him? I find it JJ is going to be a very interesting guy because this is now going to be his third year. So are you ready to cut ties with a second-round pick after 2 seasons of failure when it seems that the GM feels that the previous regime didn't develop these younger players as well as they would have liked?
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. I also think that the GM has pretty much openly said that they've made some mistakes in the past few drafts about reaching. So I'm not sure that he looks at the J.J. Ortega Whiteside pick and solely blames Doug Peterson and the talent development there. I think he understands that pick was controversial for a reason and maybe not the best pick for other reasons as well. You're right that he gets a clean slate with a new coaching staff. The problem is it becomes a numbers game. It becomes a position game. Like he is an X receiver. It's been hypothesized by some, and I can see it, that he might be even better in the slot where he's closer to the ball. He's not a downfield weapon. The problem is the Eagles already have a fairly reliable slot receiver in Greg Ward who's not explosive and not going to give you much downfield. So you would like J.J. Ortega to really shine at the X position. But they have guys there. I mean, Devontae can play some X. Jalen Reagor can play some X. Travis Fulgham is going to get a chance to improve from last year and show that maybe that last month and a half was a fluke. I mean, he's going to get an opportunity. And J.J. Ortega Whiteside does not really contribute on special teams. So if he's not going to make the roster as a top 3 or 4 wide receiver, then I don't see a role for him because they're not going to keep him on the team or have him ride the bench and not play special teams.
Yeah.
So can he crack that top 4? Well, you got Devontae, you got Reagor, and then you got a bunch of guys between Hightower and Watkins and Ward and Fulgham that he's going to have to compete with. So it's going to be difficult.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of people like the kid Grimes as well. So there's a room, and there are a lot of young guys. It's not like they have a lot of experience in that room. JJ has the most experience of them all. I mean, this is going to be his third year with Greg Ward. He's the elder statesman of this group, believe it or not. So keep that in mind as well. I think that's going to be very interesting. All right, Geoff, let's get – by the way, somebody texted in wants to know, what's the ceiling of compensation you think they would get for Dillard?
That's really hard to say.
I mean, because him and Ertz now are the two, and Ertz doesn't seem like there's a market. So if you're trying to make a trade, Dillard seems to be at the top of that list of a guy that you can pawn off.
Yeah, I want to say somewhere, most likely late day 2, early day 3, somewhere 3rd, 4th, 5th round.
Yeah.
I mean, it all depends on the desperation of the team at the time. If you lose a guy,
that's a position where there's
training camp.
desperation. That's a position where people need offensive line help. If you give me a first-round pick left tackle, I'm listening.
So I would guess that a trade like that, because of his limited playing time, but yet high pedigree from being a first-round pick, I would guess that it would be a conditional pick that the Eagles would get that would be based on playing time for Dillard, right? So, because you just absolutely never know if he's even going to get on the field. So that's why it makes it very hard to project what they would get.
All right, let's go to yesterday's trade. 4th-round pick from last year, Josiah Scott. And people said they need a corner. They got a corner. Well, he's 5'9" and 185 pounds, so he's not playing opposite Darius Slay. But can he play next to Darius Slay? And can he be in competition for that slot spot?
Well, he's going to get a shot to play the outside. And I know what everybody's thinking, right? Anybody who's done the research now or read our story on InsideTheBirds.com or maybe even on your website has seen the comp, right? They've seen that he has good speed despite being 5'9", good physicality, good athleticism. And those are all of the things that were said about Avonte Maddox coming out of Pitt as well. And similarly, a 4th-round pick, right? And Avonte Maddox clearly has not flourished on the outside, not played well. That doesn't mean, though, that Josiah Scott is definitely not going to be a good outside corner. So, we have to be careful in just deciding that one guy is going to be typecast as another just because another similarly sized guy is as well. So he'll get a shot, Mike, to see if he can play the outside, but he certainly came out of college with questions about whether or not he could play the outside because of his size limitations. But at Michigan State, he played the boundary. A couple of people I talked to told me what they liked about him on tape was that he was able to run with guys like Hamler from Penn State, who is a speedy receiver, and the kid from Ohio State, Olave, who may be one of the best receivers in the country going into next year. He ran well with those guys on tape. And so, but again, so did Avonte Maddox. Didn't work out for him on the outside. Doesn't mean Josiah Scott. But because they don't have great depth at that position, Mike, he's going to get a chance to compete and see if he can do it.
Yeah, and the thing, too, I mean, when I saw this, of course, Maddox comes up, and as you wrote, another slot stockpiling. You're going to have a lot of guys battling in that slot position. I kind of looked at it as, if we can't get another guy, Maddox has to go back outside. We can at least get a guy that we like, because I think they want to play Maddox in the slot, but if we can't, we got this guy now, and Maddox will go back out. But you're saying maybe he goes out and Maddox goes inside. Maybe he could be, Mark McMillan comes to mind, little Mighty Mouse.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. I mean, you definitely – I guess I can't slam the door because I don't know how Josiah Scott is going to adapt to this defense, what he's going to be like in training camp. So I don't want to automatically assume he'll get the first crack at outside. What I do think is that, as Nick Sirianni says, it's all competition, and Josiah Scott will have an opportunity to compete to see if he can be on the outside. And if not, could he potentially push Maddox out of the slot and start? I don't know. I mean, they're similar pedigree. I guess that's the whole spirit of competition.
Well, I guess what? The rest of that group is not very inspiring. So if you can't beat out that group of guys, that's a problem.
I think you're being kind.
Yes, that is not good. All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Over at the
Can I tell you this real quick? When I talk to guys from other teams around the league who know what the Eagles are but don't know they don't get the minutia. And I say, here's the list of their cornerbacks after Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox. And I start going through the Shaquille Taylors and the Lavert Hills. I have never had so many people laugh. I'm not that funny. But they just start laughing. It's almost inconceivable. Some of these, the Michael Jaquettes of the world, like some of these guys have just not heard of them.
I mean, Kayvon Seymour was working at FedEx. I mean, for God's sakes, when they found him last year. So, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of guys here that don't have a big pedigree. Over on the Inside the Birds platform, the Q&A. They had a great conversation regarding, I guess Jason Avant was invited to speak at the rookie camp last weekend and was really glowing about how different it is over there from when he spoke last year. And I thought that was an eye-opening, conversation that him and Quentin Michael were having on the Inside the Birds platform about how the energy's different and just like this, it almost seemed like it was very territorial last year.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. I mean, I think the way he described it was just so tense. There were obviously, behind the scenes feuds developing that people know about now, whether it's management, whether it's coaching, whether it's players. And there were just, for Jason, he did, at first he started off as the intern for training camp. Then he accepts to be an assistant wide receivers coach for a year. And the poor guy is like, hey, I want to give this coaching thing a shot. And he walks into one of the worst overall team situations that this team has had in a long, long time. And so in some regards, you can look at it and say it's pretty cool that he was able to go back and see that there was just he said a renewed sense of life back in the NovaCare. In another regard, I would say the bar was pretty low compared to, for what he went through. And that's kind of natural. You get rid of guys, you bring new people in. It is the honeymoon stage in the NovaCare complex. And that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be when all there's newness is going on. Nobody's lost a game yet. Nobody's gotten demoted. Nobody's gotten fired, right? So it's a good feeling. But when you have to rebuild a culture, that's what you at least have to start with. We remember when Chip Kelly came in here, it wasn't like the red carpet was rolled out for him by the players and they knew what they were getting into, and there was already a preconceived notion. So I think now they're getting to know Nick Sirianni, and the big key for Jason was that even he admitted as an observer, some of the press conferences left him wondering, like, is this guy for real or is he a little bit too rah-rah? And then he and Nick wound up having a good chat. And at least Jason can say it's genuine. He's not a phony. He's not a fraud. That's how he really is. How that will play during the regular season after a tough loss to Dallas is yet to be determined. But what he could determine now is that he's not putting on a face. This is really who he is.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people, today Jalen Hurts spoke, and his answer has been getting, all over the place. In fact, he's trending on Twitter today. It's almost like Pro Football Focus made him the 31st quarterback on their list of quarterbacks, which, fair or unfair, he only played 4 games last year. Part of the criteria was your history. Now, that being said, he had rookie quarterbacks ranked ahead of Jalen who have never taken a snap before. But I don't have a problem with the ranking so much. There's nothing really to go off of. But his answers today, hey, the rent is due every day. And at the end of the thing, I plan on paying my rent and not missing a day of that rent payment. I mean, and I said before, he is a leader before he is a quarterback. His quarterback skills should not be questioned. But like Russell Wilson, I say, you think of Russell Wilson the leader before you think of Russell Wilson the quarterback. And he's a tremendous quarterback. If Hurts is in the same mold, the way he handles stuff, you got yourself a great one.
Yeah, he's an interesting cat. I mean, I agree with you, and I've said all along, what really impressed me last year about Jalen Hurts was take the football, the plays away because it was such an unfair type of environment to judge him in, but his leadership and his poise were on display from day one. I mean, he wins his first start against that good New Orleans defense, and then, you're down 16-0 against Arizona on the road, took a safety, didn't have a great, first 15 minutes, and a lot of guys would have gotten lost in that. Arizona was a decent team last year, and he was able to come back and put points on the board. They lost the game, but they fought hard. And so given everything he's been through from going to Alabama to then to Oklahoma, the kid has a good story of perseverance. That's a great story. Yeah. That's what's gotten him here, Mike, the ability to do that. Having poise, having leadership, and then also then combining that with being an improved player on the football field, a better quarterback, will determine whether he can make this thing long term.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We got the Eagles wrapping up stuff with the camps. And, of course, they're always making news. Who signs tomorrow? Find out right here on Football at 4. I mean, they still need corner. I don't know. Okay, real quick, I'll ask you this. I was talking to Rob Motti about this yesterday. This is a team that won 4 games. This is a team that is kind of trying to remake itself. I don't see very many camp competitions. Do you? I see left tackle. I see corner.
Oh, I think I think there's going to be competition at linebacker. I think there's going to be competition at. If you mean starting, I would agree with you, but I still think running back.
Starting.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not saying roster spots. I'm saying I feel like every line spot but left tackle is pretty much, you're going to have Rieger and Smith, and you're probably going to have a slot competition that I would probably lean towards Ward. Goddard will be your tight end. Sanders will be your running back. There's your offense. You got Barnett, Graham, Fletcher, and Hargrave. You've got Singleton and Wilson. I don't know that anybody's beating them out. You got Slay and his merry men on the other side. You got Harris and you got McLeod.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. And that's the way it is for most NFL teams in camp for the last many years, that the starters are pretty much solidified going into camp. But I will tell you this, Mike, when we talk about that left tackle battle, this is just my opinion, all right? I'm not reporting anything. I don't think that's 50-50 going into camp. I think Jordan Mailata's job is to lose. Right?
I don't
it's
disagree
Jordan Mailata's
with you.
job to lose.
That's such a weird one, though, because you got a first-round pick who didn't play last year. You would think, we want this guy to win the job. He was a first-round pick. But there's this charm in, hey, I found a seventh-rounder, and he is our left tackle for the next 10 years. What actually makes you a better GM? Finding the seventh-round starter or hitting on the first round?
Winning. That's what makes you a better GM. And whoever gives you the best chance to win.
No. Winning the Super Bowl didn't do anything for Howie Roseman. He still stinks to everybody.
Well, I mean, again, it's like you win, but then you set the house on fire, but then you put it out with your own fire extinguisher. I don't really know how that that really goes.
Real quick, on my 53, I kept Davion Taylor. He's a third-round pick. Is he a home run to make the team?
Probably, Mike. I mean, they do have some pretty good competition here at linebacker. It would be a real issue if they I mean, it would be a real acknowledgement of the reality that they overdrafted him.
You got a new defensive coordinator. He might say, this guy don't fit with me at all. And Jannard Avery, they're moving to linebacker. Joe Osman, they're going to move to linebacker. I mean, they all are guys. I mean, Avery's another interesting one. You gave him a fourth-round pick, and he essentially gave you a sack?
Yeah, and don't forget, Ryan Kerrigan, I don't think he's going to be the traditional defensive end as some might think he is. In this defense, in the Mike Zimmer defense, they have, in a kind of a 4-3 under or a stun 4-3, whatever you want to call it. They have room for a strong side linebacker, kind of like Anthony Barr, right, who can come down on the line and also rush the passer.
Yeah.
And so if
that's what
Kerrigan
Wilson
winds
does
up
a lot of.
Yeah, yes. So Kerrigan can probably be considered a linebacker, pass rusher hybrid. So if you're counting him on the linebacker, that's an extra guy along with Wilson, along with Singleton. That's 3 right there. If you keep 5, and then it becomes, you've got Taylor, you got Sean Bradley, you got
TJ
Edwards
that they
drafted. TJ Edwards, of course, and the kid they drafted that they're turning into a linebacker from LSU. So there's competition
Jacoby
there.
Stevens.
Right. There's competition there, but the kid has the ability to run, and maybe they can figure out a way that translate onto the field.
Who knew this deep into May we had so many Eagles conversations to get into here on Football 4. All right, Geoff Mosher, make sure you follow at Inside Birds for all things Inside the Birds, and the new podcast drops tomorrow at 6 a.m. with Geoff Mosher and Adam Kaplan, and Adam is here for Football at 4 tomorrow on the Sports Bash. All right, Moshe. See you, man.
Have a great one, man.
You do the same. Geoff Mosher, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.